Okay, hello everyone. It's just me today. Everyone's back home for break. So today we'll be talking about Git and GitHub. Can everyone hear me, by the way? All right, cool. So we're going to be talking about Git and GitHub, and this is going to help you a lot for the hack challenge because you're collaborating with a lot of people, and we've heard that people are just kind of like sending each other like view controller files back and forth, and that can be really inefficient and inconvenient for a lot of reasons. And I'll kind of explain what Git is, how it works, and like how GitHub works with Git. Okay, so first, just some logistics. So please continue working on the hack challenge. We know that Thanksgiving break is coming up, so we understand if you shouldn't work on it. Basically, like please relax, like go home, de-stress, or have fun, whatever you're doing. But there will be midpoint checks happening next week. So some mentors have already reached out about that, but they'll be emailing you like sometime this week about, or like reaching out to you via whatever your method of communication is about when they're going to meet and what we'd like to see from you during that. And then there's also going to be a submission on CMS for the midpoint submission, which will be due not this Friday, but next Friday after break. Does anyone have any questions about like the hack challenge, like the midpoint check, stuff like that? All right, cool. So there's going to be an extra credit opportunity to help Eatery with user testing. They're working on some new cool features that will be coming out. You'll get, I think, 2 to 3 points of extra credit, undetermined yet. But sign up there. The link I'm going to post on Piazza as well. And it's going to be on Tuesday, November 27th. The location is TBD, but it's going to be from 4:30 to 6. And it should be cool because most of you probably use Eatery, so this will be a fun way to earn some extra credit and help app dev improve our apps. So yeah. All right, so let's do a quick review about Cocoapods because I know some people were having trouble running the projects and installing Cocoapods. So a few quick things. So when you create a Cocoapods project, you need to do pod init first inside the directory with your .xcode proj file. From there, you can do pod install or like pod install every time you add something to your pod file so that it downloads from the library. And then once you actually have that pod installed, you need to completely close Xcode and then open the .xc workspace file. You cannot use Cocoapods if you're working the .xcode proj. And so you need to only work from that workspace because that way you can have access to the libraries you actually downloaded. And then from there you can add pods to the pod file as needed. The instructions for those are usually on the library's website. And then make sure to build your project before actually using the pod libraries. This way the auto-completion features will be actually usable because some people were getting like undefined thing for Alamo Fire, and that's because they didn't build before they tried using it. So make sure you build the project before you actually try using the library. So that's the shortcut for that is Command B instead of Command R, which runs your app on the simulator. Any questions about Cocoapods? All right, cool. So now we're going to talk about Git and GitHub. So what is Git and why do we use it? Git is a version control system, which means that you can keep track of all the different changes you've made across your code or even across like other things like text files, stuff like that. You can actually view the change history of like who's changed what files and where, and then you can actually revert and undo changes. So for example, if you like break your app somehow, you can find the last commit or like lines of code that you like changed that broke the app, and then you can revert it back to what it was before. So it's kind of like a cool way, a little more complicated than Google Docs, but ideally it should be as easy to use as Google Docs is for like your code, so that you can work with lots of people and it's not super complicated when it comes to like 2 people working on the same file and having like conflicts and stuff like that. So what is GitHub? GitHub is basically an online host for Git, which means that you can host a GitHub repository, which is like where you host your code on GitHub. There's a large open source community on GitHub where people have open source software. So like anyone can see the code and like make contributions to it and like make issues and like add to it. So for example, like AppDev is an open source project team, which means that all of our code for all of our apps are available on GitHub. The link is there if you want to check it out. I might show it later. And basically, even if you're interested in working on one of these apps, you can like download the code, like make some changes because you think maybe we need a new feature on one of our apps, like Eatery or like Ithaca Transit, and then you can make a pull request, which notifies us that you want to pull your changes into our code, and we'll actually be able to review it, and maybe your feature will be accepted into our app. So that's like something cool that maybe if after this course is over, you want to do something fun, maybe like take a look at the issues that are located on each repository page. So let's say like Eatery iOS has an issue for like fixing BRB login, and like you have an idea for how that would be fixed. You can like download the code, like write the code for fixing that login, and then submit a pull request to app dev, and then we'll have people on the team review it and see if it like could be a good fit for the app. All right, cool. So how do you work with GitHub? As I mentioned, you work with repositories. So usually this involves like the code for one project. So the first thing you're going to have to do is initialize the repository on your computer, and you can do that through the command line by typing in git init, and this will kind of create like a git like area for you to start working on your code. You can add collaborators, and then you can push, pull, edit, and commit your code, and I'll explain what kind of those terms mean in a second. So how do you work with GitHub? Your project will exist on two different repositories. So one is your local repository, which is on your computer, so like the Xcode project, like on your file system, stuff like that. And then your remote repository, which is actually on github.com. So you're going to make changes by typing stuff in, like writing new code in your local repository on your computer. You're going to commit those changes, and then you can push it to the remote repository so that it'll actually show up on github.com. And if someone else made a change to the remote repository, so if someone else is working on a GitHub project with you, and they made a change to a certain file, and you want to now see that change on your computer, you can pull from that remote repository. Does anyone have any questions? All right, cool. So here's like a little diagram of how this might work. So let's say we have two people, one on the left and one on the right, and they have this remote repository up on github.com. They're both going to pull from the remote repository, maybe work on some feature, and then they're going to push it back to the remote repository so that both sides can receive those changes. So you're adding and committing changes locally, but then you're pushing those local changes up to the remote server so that everyone has access to them. Okay, so there are kind of three parts when working with Git: the working directory, the staging area, and the head. So what the working directory is basically where you're editing files, writing code, like maybe you're making new view controllers or like objects or classes and stuff like that. That's all going to be happening in your working directory. And when you're ready to kind of save the work that you've done, this is where you move to the staging area. So this is where you prepare commits. And commits are basically parts of the code that you want to prepare to push to the remote repository. And how do you like add stuff to your commit? You do git add and then the name of the file to add that file into your commit. And then the head is where you actually commit your changes. So that means basically you want to save all these files that you've edited into one like kind of commit or like a bundle of changes, and you have to add a message to your commit. So how you do that is git commit -m in single quotes your commit message, and then you can commit your changes to local master, which is basically your local repository's like golden standard code. So what's like been most updated recently. So let's start by making a GitHub repo. I'm just gonna make like a really simple like app with a background color, I think, which will be the easiest way to kind of demonstrate this. And then we'll keep going from there. So first I'm gonna go to github.com. So this is what my GitHub looks like. Basically you can see I've like followed a bunch of people and I like follow a bunch of repositories, and you can see that we've like pushed commits to like a certain branch. And so to create a new repository, you can either click this new over here, Or if you go to your profile, your repositories, you click New, and then it'll take you to this page. So I'm going to call it like GitHub Demo. You can add a description. And then you can set it to public. I think private costs money, but there's a student plan that you can get for free for 4 years that allows you to have free private repositories. So as an FYI, if you're interested in getting a GitHub like student account. Okay, so I'm going to make it public, and then I can click Create, and then it'll take me to this page. So it's saying quick setup. You can just have this link, and this link is what the link to your remote repository is on github.com. So I haven't created my project yet, so I'm going to follow this block of text, the first step. If you already have a project, you can do git init to initialize your repository, like with all of your Xcode files, and then you can do git remote add origin, which will add this as your remote, this link as your remote repository, and then you can push those changes to your remote repository. So I'm going to first start off by going to Xcode, and I want to create a new project. So I'm going to do this. Okay, so single view, GitHub demo, and then once that's done, I'm going to save it in lecture 8 because I just want to save it there, and then I can click create. You can also select this, create Git repository on my Mac if you know that you want to create a brand new Git repository. So I can click create. And then once that's created, I can actually now open up my terminal. So if I go here, let me zoom in. So right now, I'm not in the right directory because I placed my project in the lecture 8 folder. So if I cd, we'll basically change the directory. So if I go to lectures, lecture 8, and now I ls, you can see that I have this GitHub demo project. So I can cd into that. And basically, if you do ls, you can see now that it's changed to green, which means that it's in its own master and branch, and it's like completely up to date. My terminal looks like this because I like downloaded extra fancy stuff. And if you're interested in like downloading that, we can talk about it later. But it's like nice because you can see what branch you're on and stuff like that. So now if I do git init, we can see that we already have this Git repository and we've initialized it. And so now I'm just going to follow these steps. So I'm going to do echo GitHub demo arrow readme.md. And then I'm going to do, I already did git init, I can do git add readme.md, commit, and then add origin, and then push. So right now, in order to determine which changes you've made locally but not committed to your staging area, you can do git status. So it's saying what is the status of my project and what have I not added yet. So it's saying I haven't added readme.md, so I can do git add readme.md, and that's basically saying I want to add readme.md to my next commit. Or like I want to save it and now I'm like ready to push it to my like remote server. So once I've done that, there's a little plus button or plus next to here. So now we can commit because I want to commit these added changes. So add readme. And now I can set the upstream by just doing git remote add origin yada yada, and I can paste this in. And then the last thing is git push -u origin master. And so what this is saying is I want to push what I have locally to the master branch of the remote repository. So once I do that, it might take some time, but so it's gonna push everything, and now it's saying I have pushed to a new branch called master, and master is basically the golden standard branch. And we'll talk about branching in a second. So now if I refresh this, you can see that I've actually added the README, and now I have this GitHub demo repository with like view controller files inside there. Does anyone have any questions about like setting up and creating your GitHub repository? Okay, cool. So going back, let's talk about branching. So I mentioned earlier that we are on branch master, which is basically like the ideal, like golden standard production branch. So like if I were releasing this to the App Store, like I would be releasing the master branch, like latest update to the App Store, because that's like the branch that like has everything is working, and like it's great. But if you want to work on a separate feature, a lot of the times when you're collaborating with someone, you can branch off of the main code, develop your feature separately, and then merge it back into master when you're done with that feature. So that means that you can develop off of the main code, and that means you won't run into like build errors or crashes, like your stuff is isolated on its own branch. And so how do you create a new branch? You can do git checkout -b, like your branch name, so you can call it whatever, to create a new branch. And then if you want to switch to another branch that exists, you can just do git checkout and then the branch name. So here's an example of kind of how this might work. So we've got like this green line down the middle, which is our master branch. And let's say that we have 3 people working on 3 different things. One is like fixing a bug, and then 2 of them are adding new features. So let's say person A branches off into branch A. They work on their code. They can commit as many times as they want, and those commits will be saved onto their branch. And then branch B is fixing a bug, so they're committing and like pushing to their branch. Branch C is working on a sidebar. This one's taking some more time, so they have like their own commits there. And let's say this bug has been fixed. So now all of the commits from branch B and all of the updated code that fixes the bug can now be merged into the master branch. And then branch A is now moving along, and now they're ready to merge their features in. So they will merge that in, and now you can see both the video and the new feature have been added to master. And then last but not least, branch C has like finally finished their feature, and now they're ready to merge back into master. So now all 3 changes are now going to be displayed on the latest master. Does that make sense? Does anyone have any questions? Okay, cool. So you're probably thinking, merging branches, like how does that work if everyone has different pieces of code? So when you're done working on a feature on your branch, you want to merge it back into the master branch. And so how you do this is you check out the master branch from the branch that you were on, and then you can just type in git merge and then the name of the branch that you were on. So if I was on a branch called like Mindy, I can just do git merge Mindy while I'm on the master branch. And then once you're done, you can usually just delete the branch. So then you can say git branch -d and then the name of your branch to delete it. So now everything's clean. You've just got a working master with all of your features like done and completed. Something that can come up if 2 people are editing the same code is that merge conflicts will occur, and they're kind of a pain because maybe you'll get these like markers with like arrow, arrow, arrowhead, and then equals, 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 and then master. Don't be afraid of those. That's actually Git telling you, here's what changes you made, here are the changes that master has that you don't have. Because let's say you were working on a feature, someone else merged into master all of their new features, and now you're trying to update the 2, but you've both edited the same file. Git will mark these and then let you know that, wow, there's like a change. Which one do you want to like take? And usually you can just read through the sections in between like the greater than or less than signs and the equal sign. And then you can determine, oh, actually, we wrote a lot of the same code. I can just delete my changes. Or like, oh, maybe I want a little bit of both. And you can manually like pick which like lines of code you want to fix. So you have to do this manually, unfortunately, but this makes it a lot easier for you versus like you having to look through every single line one by one and figuring out whether or not it's the same, because Git will mark this specifically for you. Another thing that comes up are pull requests. So as I mentioned before, you can submit a pull request to one of AppDev's repositories, and this is basically a formal request to pull your changes, usually on a branch, into the master branch. And so you can see all the code that will be on display. You can add people that will review your code and make comments on it. You don't need to do this for the hack challenge. This is more for like open source software and like more formal review processes like in the industry when you write code. So people can like request changes and say, oh, this seems like you wrote it in like 50 lines, you can write it in 10, can you fix that? Or like, you need to remove this like extra new line, or people will ask like, oh, why did you decide to choose this versus that? And then the reviewers can approve or reject your pull request, and then once it's approved, you can merge it into the branch that you're requesting, which is usually master. So then finally, after you've submitted your pull request and it gets approved, then your changes will be merged. So this is more of like a formal process that is used on GitHub a lot when people are like writing software. We use these a lot in AppDev. Like you can't just push your code to the master branch because we want everyone to review it first and make sure everyone's on the same page. This like ensures good code quality. But for the hack challenge, like we don't expect you to have like sparkling beautiful code because you're like learning it. So you don't need to do this for the hack challenge, but like just for your reference, it does come up on GitHub a lot. Okay, so let's do another demo, this time with branching, merging, and then I'll show you some cool things that Xcode actually has so that you don't have to like type in the terminal all the time. So let's say I'm on Xcode right now and I'm like not going to set it up or anything. I'm just going to set like view.background color. Let's say it's blue. And so let's say like that's my one change. I can go back to GitHub and I can say like git status, like so what's the status of the changes I've made? You can see that I've modified the view controller. So I can do git add GitHub demo / view controller. Another thing you can do if you've made changes to a lot of files, you can do git add dot, but this is dangerous because sometimes you might have files you like don't want to like have the world see, like secret API keys or like I don't know, like random like trash files that you might have like created by accident. So just be aware and always use git status before you git add anything to your staging area. So once I've done that, I can commit. So git commit -m change background color. And let's say like I committed this, but let's pretend I'm working with someone else and they've also changed the background color. So another way you can like edit stuff on GitHub is you can actually manually edit the files inside. So let's say I do this, and let's say someone else has actually changed it. Let's say someone else has changed it to red, and I didn't know. So another way you can do stuff is like you can type it manually into GitHub, but the bad thing about this is like you can't run it. This is only like if you really need to make one tiny change online, but this is just for like demonstration purposes. So this will commit this viewcontroller.swift file directly to master. So if I click commit, now that's been changed. So now the background color is set to red. So now let's say I also check out a branch. So I can do git checkout -b, let's say Mindy background color. And let's say I've changed, so now I'm on my own branch, but everything that's locally on my computer is now isolated on this branch called Mindy background color. And let's say I've changed the color on Xcode, let's say I'll make it like green. So now we've got 3 separate changes. So I can also commit this by doing git commit or git add. I'm just going to do a git add dot because I know the only file is viewcontroller.swift that's been changed. I can add a commit message, change background color to green. And Here now I can actually push it to the remote repository if I wanted to. And what this does is it'll push it to a separate branch on the github.com website. So if I try and do git push, it'll say, oh, there's no upstream branch, which means that this branch isn't available on github.com. So it says to push the current branch and set the remote as upstream. I can just copy and paste this command. And this is basically saying, create a new branch on github.com that's also called Mindy background color, and set the remote repository of this branch to the same branch name online. So once I've done that, I've actually pushed my branch to GitHub. And so if you go back to the code page, you can see now there's two branches. One is master, which we just updated, and then one is Mindy background color. So now, let's say I want to merge my change into master. So the way we do this is git checkout master. So now I've switched to branch master, and I want to merge my branch name into master. So I'm going to do git merge Mindy / background color. And then if I press enter, it'll actually update that. So now, if I open my view controller, we can see like the view.background color is green. But now, if I try and merge with master, let's say I want to push all of my changes, so I've changed my background color to green. So I can do git push, and that'll say I want to push my changes from this local computer up to GitHub. So if I do git push, and then it'll give me this error. So it's saying, error, failed to push some refs to this remote URL because the remote contains work that you do not have locally. So this is saying another repository has pushed to the same ref, yada yada, and it's saying someone has made changes like on github.com that you don't have locally, so you need to first pull those changes before you can then make your updates and then push again. So why does this happen? This happens because you need all of your stuff to be as up to date as possible so that you can properly push and not override someone else's changes. So it's asking me to git pull, so I'm going to git pull. And so now we can see, oh no, we have a merge conflict in the view controller because we edited on github.com that the view controller color is red, but locally we have it as green. So now it's going to say fix the conflicts and then commit the results, and we can see like my terminal has this like icon that it's saying you have a merge conflict. So I can go to Xcode, and now you can see these little markers. So it's saying this is head, which is our local head, which is on our computer, and it's saying we made this change that the view background color is green. But then there's this hash, which is basically saying the commit hash, which is like a local unique, or it's not local, it's a unique identifier of what commit was made on github.com. It's saying that identifier commit actually changed the background color to red. So now we have to resolve this conflict. I'm gonna say, screw it, the person's wrong. Like, we agreed that the background color was green with the designers, so I'm gonna take my change by just deleting everything else and saving it like that. So I can override whatever someone else made. Sometimes if maybe you have like more code from the other commit, you can have like let view equals like UI view, whatever. Maybe they have other code that you think is important. You can also just pick whatever lines of code that you think you need and then delete the little markers that way. And Xcode will actually warn you and say there's a conflict in your source file. Okay, so let's delete all of that. We just want the color to be green. And now we have to recommit and repush because we need to commit the merge conflict change and then repush it so that everyone else can see our changes. And so everyone knows like the view background color is going to be green for sure. So if I do git status one more time, it'll say, oh, you both modified the view controller. So I'm going to add it. And then I can commit, so with the message fix merge conflict. And now I can push this to the remote repository by doing git push. So once this is pushed, we can refresh this code website, and we can see now that the background color is green. And the cool thing is you can actually see your commit history. So if you click on the number of commits, you can see here, like, I committed one change and pushed it that the background color was blue, and then here's another commit where I changed it to green, and stuff like that. And like, it's kind of cool because you can actually sometimes if you've like broken something, you can click on this thing called blame, and it'll show you like exactly who committed what. So if you mess something up and you're like, I know who did it. Yeah. All right, so now that we've done that, we've pushed everything from our branch, so now we can do git branch to show all the branches that we have. And you can see that the star shows that we're on master, but we want to delete Mindy background color, so I can do git branch -d Mindy / background color. And that will delete it. So now if I do git branch, I only have one branch and it's master. All right, cool. So let's say this kind of terminal stuff is like kind of scary because you have to remember exactly what to type into the terminal, and if you write something wrong, it like is a headache. Xcode has some really cool command line tools. So let's say we want to make a table view. And let's just create it here. So table view equals UI table view, stuff like that. You can see that Xcode actually has these little lines showing these are changes that you've inserted, and if you don't want it, you can just click discard. So Xcode has some Git tools that's like, this is new based on your like workings area, and you can then stage these changes to and then commit them. So the way you do that is there's this source control bar up here. If you click on it, you can do commit. And so this will actually show you what you can commit. So it's saying, this is comparing what I have locally and the most up-to-date master I have locally. And it's saying, look, you've inserted these two changes, and you can say, oh, I don't want to commit that I made a table view, or I don't want to commit that like I created a table view. So here it's like much easier to like pick. You can like discard it if you don't want it, but then you can go back. So this is really nice because it gives you a nice visual representation of what exactly you changed and whether or not you want to push it. So, all right, so let's say I have two Git repositories, which makes it kind of confusing, but just ignore the bottom one. So it's saying I changed something in view controller, and then you can enter your commit message. So create like table view, and then you can also specify whether or not you want to push this to your remote repository. So then you don't have to first commit and then push to github.com. This will just commit and then push straight to GitHub. So usually that's what you're going to want to do. So let's say I just do create table view, and then you can say commit file and push, and then that will directly say, let's say I only want to push it to GitHub demo, and then I can do commit and push. Oh crap. Hold on. I have two-factor authentication. Okay, so it's pushing, and now if I go back and refresh, you can see like it's done for me. I've created the table view, and you can see what insertions I've made at which lines, which is really cool. And then another thing you can do is, let's say I want to pull from the latest master. You can just click pull. You can create a Git repository. You can discard all of your changes locally and just take what's not been commit, or what your last commit was. So you can also fetch, which means like if maybe you've checked out someone else's branch locally, and then you've switched to another branch, but you want to fetch all of the branches and all of their latest updates, you can use fetch and refresh status. But yeah, does anyone have any questions about like GitHub tools, Git, merge conflicts, stuff like that. Okay, cool. Yeah, class is gonna end probably pretty early today, unless if you all have like any suggestions for things to talk about. But as a last reminder, Monica, the iOS co-lead this semester, made a really great Git handout that I'm gonna upload to the website and Piazza if you want more information, because there's a lot of things like that I didn't cover. I only covered like the basics, but Git is super powerful. And if you're curious on like how to use it to its like full potential, definitely check that out. Continue working on the hack challenge. Your midpoint check is happening next week. The submission is due on next Friday at 11:59 to CMS. I know it's kind of late, but because of Thanksgiving, I didn't want to have the midpoint due like right after break, which would pressure you to work on it over break. But ideally, schedule your midpoint check as early as possible next week, because we do want to see and give you feedback before you actually turn in your final project. And your submission should just be the Xcode project like zipped up like normal, and double check that you have everything like compressed properly. All right, that's it. Thanks for coming. If you have questions, come up and ask.